Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Back to the show with Alex Stojcevic and Rudy Kisher in studio, both lawyers, immigration lawyers with the Vancouver firm Maynard Kisher Stojcevic. We're talking about the new Citizenship Act that, in fact, has actually kind of been law for several months. It was proclaimed last year, but as we're learning from our guests, really most of the provisions of the act won't be in effect until this June. And our lawyer friends, believe me, are almost as in the dark as you and I are on this one. Rudy was saying just during the break that they have to give us 30 days notice before the implementation, before the door is officially open and we're in business with the new stuff. But you have no idea when that 30 days is coming down, do you?
They haven't told us. All we're sort of existing on is rumor, so we're not sure when it's going to happen. But my guess is it'll probably happen before the election, and we have every reason to believe it will happen this summer.
Right, of course, and it's an October election date that's canceled, or that's scheduled, rather, not canceled. This would, I assume, play into the government's election campaign. Look at what we're doing to revise the Immigration Act and make Canada a safer place to live. That would, I'm sure, be the thrust of their politics behind it.
That's probably true, and that plays well into a June implementation date, or let's say July 1st, Canada Day implementation date.
Yeah.
A couple of the things that play into that, we've been talking about harder to get. That was one of the taglines, and then it's easier to lose.
Right.
So some of the changes on the enforcement side of the citizenship legislation include removing, for the vast majority of cases, federal court oversight over citizenship where someone is suspected of having obtained it fraudulently.
Okay.
So right now, if a person is suspected of having obtained citizenship through fraud or misrepresentation,
they lied on their application.
They lied on their application, or they lied on a permanent residence application, and that formed the basis of a lie in a citizenship application.
And the red flag goes up.
And the red flag goes up. There is a procedure to strip people of citizenship.
Okay.
But there is a safeguard. If the minister believes that you've obtained citizenship in this way, you as a citizen have the right to ask the federal court to review this decision and in a trial determine on a balance of probabilities whether or not it's true that you obtained citizenship through fraud.
And you have represented individuals at such trials.
I have, yes, it's true. It's true. And this is a powerful safeguard. I mean, federal court is a court of law where there's rules of evidence and where there's discovery and documents have to be provided, and
so
there are witnesses under oath.
The government's got to be able to prove it.
They have to prove it.
Right.
Now, that is largely being done away with. And the reason for that is because the Canadian government in the past 6 or 7 years, through investigations, has determined that there are far more cases of people obtaining citizenship through misrepresentation than they ever believed. This is a result of the prosecution of several immigration consultants in Eastern Canada and one out in Western Canada that were involved in fraud on a mass scale.
Okay.
And what that left the government is several thousand cases of misrepresentation that they had to deal with. The challenge with the system as it is now is there's never more than a handful of cases a year that are put forward into federal court. And it's usually people who've lied about criminal records.
Okay.
And
highly undesirable, to say the least.
Well, arguably, yes, sir, sure.
And a real concern to the public.
And a real public safety concern. Well,
Okay.
now you have people that are not necessarily have done anything criminal, but what they've done is they've lied about or misled the government about something to do with their residence in Canada.
Okay.
And there are so many of these cases that, one of their options was to simply hire more justice lawyers and take up more federal court time and prosecute these cases. But they've chosen not to do that. Instead, what they've done is they've changed the procedure so that there is no more federal court oversight over a large part of this area. Instead, they've left that for cases involving criminals and involving fraud relating to crimes against humanity and war crimes. That has remained as it is. However, for all the other types of misrepresentation, they've now created an administrative procedure that's internal, where the minister will appoint civil servants to decide if misrepresentation has been made or not.
And you got to think of the irony of that. So the people that we're giving the most protection to are the ones that have been accused of a serious crime or a war crime.
Right.
Those are the ones that are getting the greatest procedure.
Right, with judicial oversight and all the rest of it.
Whereas somebody is accused of having maybe perhaps filled out a form wrong and put that they were 100 days more in Canada than they were, those are the ones that we're going to take away their citizenship without having any judicial oversight. Right?
Okay.
So I mean, the situation I think is very sad, actually. Because I mean, what does Canadian citizenship mean at the end of the day if we're not going to have a judge to look over it? Right?
Well, what happens though if and I'm going back to Alex's point here, Rudy, about these consultants, and they have long client lists, and these people put their faith and in many cases considerable sums of money into the hands of these consultants, assuming that they're going to do the right thing by them and get them somehow or another into Canada. So they do what they're asked to do by these consultants. As far as they're concerned, they're following the rules. And then all of a sudden, the guy whose rules they're following turns out to be a crook.
Well, I think, in fairness, the forms do actually say often, how many days have you spent in Canada? And I don't want to cast any, you see the odd client that comes in, I guess, you see a client that comes in and you have to ask them, well, how many days have you actually been in Canada? When the letter comes back and says, we have questions about how long you've been in there.
Okay.
And they look at, well, I've got my passport. It's, it only shows I went out X number of days. And you're like, well, how many days have you actually been in Canada?
Right,
and that question comes back, and then it's shocking. The few days that they've actually been in Canada, they have misrepresented. And, those cases, why have they made the application? Well, they wanted the passport for a specific reason. And a common reason is a lot of these applicants were coming from, the UAE. They were working abroad. As it's well known that you get extra, your pay will increase 2 to 3 times if you have a Western passport, such as a Canadian passport. And the interest of being in Canada is actually often very little. And the reason that they've gone ahead with this is to get that passport, to get the increase in pay.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. If you lived here the right amount of days and applied for citizenship, then it would be fair ball. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. But the problem is a lot of this fraud was tied to people wanting their cake and eating it at the same time.
So there aren't many innocent victims of unscrupulous immigration consultants,
no,
or as many
Certainly
as perhaps
there are,
the public believes.
But there's often a level of recklessness on the part of these clients who don't want to know what's being done in their name so that they can play like they're innocent, or who are often willfully blind to who've gone to the consultant because the consultant has told them a story.
Right.
And, I mean, lawyers are not immune from this. There have been lawyers that have been caught under the same types of rules, though never to the level that consultants are. The difference, of course, is that lawyers are regulated by, the Law Society, which has teeth and which has which has a mandate to protect the public, whereas immigration consultants have had a very strange and, I would say, choppy kind of regulatory scheme that has changed every few years back, going now 10, 15 years, and the protection of the public level is not what it has been with the law societies across Canada.
I mean, some of the misrepresentation you see that's innocent, if I think back to my clients, is perhaps maybe not as in it that they had for different reasons, they had a different age on the passport that they came with, right? And they were born a different year. And so that comes out later. And that's clearly a misrepresentation when they applied. They lied about their age of birth.
Right.
Did it really affect how many days they were here? Not really. And at the end of the day, that shouldn't be something that's held against them. If you look at the forms, you've got to account for where you've been for in the future. It'll be for the last 6 years. Well, if you travel a lot, it's hard to keep track of that date, those dates, unless you are planning ahead of time and you keep, you're religious about it and keep a log of every time you go out. And sometimes people innocently make a mistake. They forget about a trip down to Bellingham. They forget how long they were gone.
Right.
And those things happen. But I think what we hope the government is targeting is these cases where, it's wholesale fraud. They've been in Canada. They're saying they've been in Canada 1,095 days, and they've been in here Canada 30 days.
And the group that will determine whether or not that they said they've been here, they've claimed to have been here for so long, but there's the group that will make the decision based on these claims is no longer a judicial body. This is a group of civil servants, some kind of panel appointed by, I assume, Alex, the Minister of Immigration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. These will be civil servants, and probably in Ottawa. It's going to be very similar to the adjudication system that has been set up by the Recourse Directorate in Customs, which is a paper-type application. If you've had a customs seizure at the border, you have to apply to a adjudicator who's on a paper-type application, who has an office in Ottawa and who you're dealing with in Ottawa. Now, Ottawa civil servants, nothing wrong with a civil servant in Ottawa making a determination, unless you have to explain to them that I was only in Blaine an hour. Why is that being held against me?
Right.
I went and filled up gas. So what if my ISIS record says I left Canada that day? I was gone for an hour. I actually worked the rest of the day.
Right.
If he has no idea where Blaine is, if he doesn't understand that Point Roberts is surrounded by Canada on all sides,
Right.
you know, this is a problem with moving decisions from an open forum where you can explain to someone what Point Roberts is and moving it to Ottawa where they have no idea of any of these local issues.
Has there ever been regional authority, Rudy? Now that we're centralizing all of this in Ottawa, was there ever a time when the appeal body for these people who are maybe fudging on their applications or not was a regional based somewhere in British Columbia, or has everything always been forced to go through Ottawa?
No, for the longest time, there's been a regional base where it goes to a citizenship judge. So
Okay,
here in
right.
Vancouver, we have 4 citizenship judges that sit there, and then cases where there may be some subjective element, or there may be some question about the authenticity of documents, or a question of like, why were you gone that day? It doesn't say here. It says here that you were gone. Meanwhile, you're saying you're here. That would be heard here by a citizenship judge. You know, you'd be able to have a lawyer present and go over that issue. And if you weren't satisfied with that,
Then you could go to Ottawa.
Then you could go to federal court on that,
Right,
on a
okay.
paper process. But at least you'd have a chance to be heard, which is going to be lost under this process.
We still do, in the first instance when you apply, it will be local officers who are making the decision, locally based officers, at least for now.
Yeah.
But the trend with this government has been to close citizenship
offices.
and immigration regional offices. And now the interfaces are increasingly, you know, the phone or
the 1-800
internet.
number, which, you know, my clients, you know, we get a lot of business through people that are so frustrated trying to actually just talk to a person at the government about their application.
Oh, sure.
That they have to give up. They said, forget it. I can't. I've been on the phone for 2 days straight and I can't talk to somebody.
Right. Rudy, talk to us about these tax provisions that apply under the new Citizenship Act. You've alluded to them a couple of times. What's different about, or will be different later this year, with respect to people who want to become Canadian citizens, who've been here for a while, and their taxes? Connect the dots.
Well, in the past, there was no connection. They're separate acts, as you know. There's the Tax Act. There's the Citizenship Act. They're totally separate. And prior to this, if someone, for legal reasons, didn't file their taxes, had a reason not to file their taxes, they were late filing their taxes.
Then you got to battle with the Canada Revenue Agency.
And that's the organization that you should be battling with.
Right.
Your citizenship, the old forms didn't even ask for you to provide your tax documents. Now they are asking you to put your tax documents forward, but there's no requirement that you have filed your tax documents. The assumption is, if you're not filing your taxes, well, maybe we should ask some more questions as to, are you actually in the country?
Okay. Not filing taxes is seen by the government as absence.
Well,
right?
It's kind of evidence. Why haven't you filed your taxes? Maybe you have a reason. You're in the middle of a divorce. It's complicated. You've hired an accountant. There might be a reason,
right.
But you've got to explain it. It's not a sort of one. It sort of makes them get the microscope out and look a little question. Are you actually here those 1,095 days that you're supposed to? The new system is totally different. It's no longer an option. Right? If you're going to have that year counted, you have to have filed taxes that year, or else it doesn't count. Which, to me, I think sort of does away with sort of the complexity of the Tax Act. There's a variety of reasons why people may not have filed taxes. They may not have to file taxes.
Yeah.
They may be filing taxes in the United States and paying taxes in the United States and spending half of their time outside of Canada, and they've got an agreement where they don't have to file taxes.
Well, yeah. What about the person who's got a job in Bellingham,
right.
but is back home every night in Vancouver?
Sure. Yeah.
And is filing in both places and is declaring primary in the U.S. and is claiming that when they file their Canadian, and it comes up that they're
global income.
As
right?
global income,
right?
How's that going to be handled?
So we
don't know.
The government basically is looking for, because they want to cut costs, they want to get rid of civil servants. They're sort of looking for a one size fits all.
Right.
And given the complexity of, number one, our tax system and our immigration system, it really doesn't work. I mean, I think what they've done in the past recently in terms of asking for your tax records, that to me makes sense. I mean, I think it was a poor practice in the past not ever asking for those documents. Actually, when I started practice, I was shocked at, you'd looked at the form for citizenship. Literally, it was 5 pages, fill it out and give us a copy of your identity page on your passport, and that was it. So they were doing actually very little background checks. Now they're asking for the tax documents, which you think would be enough. The government I think, has gone a little bit too far in saying it's now mandatory you have to file taxes, because there's people that don't have to file, maybe exempt from filing taxes for for a variety of legal reasons, may have issues with filing taxes. They may have hired a lawyer. They may be delaying for some reasons why they're having to file their taxes because, it's a sale of a company or something. All that's going to be lost, right?
And plus, you're ending up, there's going to be inevitably some poor schmuck who hasn't filed a tax return in a decade, but has probably made almost no money, and who now won't be able to get a Canadian passport, principally because of something that's completely unrelated whether or not he's actually lived here. And there's got to be you would think that there has to be some reasonable way of accommodating that.
I would agree with Rudy, by the way, Alex, that and I imagine everyone listening to us right now would agree that the Canadian Tax Act is one incredibly complicated piece of legislation. Not many people listening, including yours truly, understand the Citizenship and Immigration Act, but I think we would all probably agree equally that it is at least as complicated as the Tax Act. And now the government wants to merge these two to make it easier for people to become Canadians? Good luck with that one, from an observer's point of view at least. Do you see it as being viable? We need to take a break here, but let's just finish this thought.
Well, I think it's going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to put people, as Alex pointed out, in a hardship situation. If they're not filing taxes, quite often they may not be high-income earners. Those people that don't owe taxes may not file. Right? What's the point of filing if I don't owe any taxes? Those people are going to be punished.
Will tell you, you don't need to file this year. You didn't make enough money. Forget it.
You don't owe any money. It doesn't matter. Now they're going to have to.
Now it does.
Yeah.
And for no real good financial or tax reason, you're going to have to now change your back file, pay a penalty to get something that there's no really big issue with you getting, right? Canadian citizenship. So.
Well, you probably deserve it, but the government, for ease of processing, is going to punish those people on the margins.
We're talking about the new Citizenship Act, such as it is, because its implementation is not yet complete. We'll know more about it as the year goes along, and with just a little bit of luck, we'll have our guests along with us throughout the year to help us sort this out. Our guests in studio, Rudy Kisher and Alex Stoychevich from the Vancouver immigration and citizenship firm Maynard Kisher Stoychevich. This is The Law Show on CIL 650, and we'll be right back.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.